soul water. Om Aguru Vajradhara Sumati Muni Shasane Karma Uttavardhani Shri Bhadrava Samanya Sarva Siddhi Om Aguru Vajradhara Sumati Muni Shasane Karma Shri Bhadrava Samanya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Aguru Vajradhara Sumati Muni Shasane Karma Uttavardhani Shri Bhadrava Samanya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Aguru Vajradhara Sumati Muni Shasane Karma Uttavardhani Shri Bhadrava Samanya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Aguru Vajradhara Sumati Shasane Karma Uttavardhani Shri Bhadrava Samanya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Aguru Vajradhara Shasane Karma Uttavardhani Shri Bhadrava Samanya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Aguru Vajradhara Samanya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Aguru Vajradhara Muni Shasane Karma Uttavardhani Shri Bhadrava Samanya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Aguru Vajradhara Sumati Muni Shasane Karma Uttavardhani Shri Bhadrava Samanya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Aguru Vajradhara Sumati Muni Shasane Karma Uttavardhani Shri Bhadrava Samanya Sarva Siddhi Chetun Lama Tuje Chan Namda Tuje Sisusu Givesha Sandala Dendusu Yusungi Nawatsedusu Sechinine Solwate Petse de Chenkolo Suleshune Vila Sampetu Malu Pake Melungi Dorpachingi Lopsone Sudanti Tu Shepetse Dukinanke Yisuleshune Jensuni Yunsu Sopa Dancherani Tuche Warajingi Lo Chanchu Pargini Tse Tutu Nio peme se drule shune, chanchu du peki ki kushishin tu ke de la du projingilo, dagilo na chula chuba dan chumi se giorne pa shiwatan, chudan tu maliu pa be me lungi tu parchingilo, tornate ne serap tamcheta, tishin kordu namte tamche dure se chiamne lama chiele me tu ce chagi tala si susu, kyunque adewe napta ta chala jetun la me tu ce ragune, kudan sungi na wadre me du nyam sunye warke santo parsho ke Kundu yada lama tantre me chiki pela luchuchi langi interrupzione torge changi ko parnuto show Kudanda gielu pakyuke sundanda giena pakyuke tutanda giena Chitu jingilo Makyuke kudanda gielu Makyuke sundanda giena Makyuke tutanda giena Dunirme chitu jingilo Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Shakya Muni Yede Kempadi Sange Shintu Minte Ulwargi Drugu Namda Shina Chuparsho Dam kurur namandala kaneyatayami. Chadan sugi chanamla achanchu bardu tani kyapsuchi dagi chinsungi pet sonamgi drola penchir sange tu parasho sangenge chadan sugi chanamla chanchu bardu tani kyapsuchi dagi chinsungi pet sonamgi drola penchir sange tu parasho sange chadan sugi chanamla Chancho partu tani kyapsuchi, dagi jinsungi petsonamgi, drola pinchira sange tu parasho. In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. With the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Every time I read this text that I need to explain, I have trouble. Every verse, I want to stay a long time on each verse. And now we're on page 19. And each verse is so beautiful, is so full, deep. One could spend days and days talking about it. That is hard for me to move from one to the next. So I'm trying to find this balance between to staying on the verse, and staying the sufficient amount of time on each verse. But so I'm trying to find this balance between moving on and but we don't have there's no hurry. I mean, we're here not to study medicine, but to be cured. And if we're here to study, at that point, to explain each point, in an academic way, the meaning of each verse, and then we move on. We'd move on, but what we need is not often to understand, but to reflect in many from many different points of view, so that we familiarize ourselves with that knowledge, so that it becomes part of our own mind. At the same time, there's some passages, like the one we're going to start now, that without an explanation, it becomes very difficult to understand the meaning. And either one has very strong predisposition from other lives, or one needs a deeper explanation, like this next verse we're going to see, this next part. So we're at the last verse of verse 15. This text, when it was translated, I've seen different translations. The way in which the verses were divided is not always the same. In this way, the way we've done it, there's some space to make it better. Like here in verse 15, this last verse would actually be the beginning of verse 16, and it begins with Nika Tompani Dunkom Kantu Chaten Yu Uchunse Kuma Pumpa Shinduta Minyan Samnyang Tupetse. So meditate on the emptiness of both. And here we have three main words here. Meditate, emptiness, and then both. To meditate means to familiarize oneself. Familiarize yourself, but with what? With emptiness. The emptiness of what? The emptiness of both. So first of all, what do we mean today? Before looking at emptiness, what is both referred to? Both refers both refers to the two main categories with which we relate to in our lives. So we have objects of attraction, and we have objects of aversion, and then there are also objects of neutrality, of indifference. It's really interesting how we live our reality, where it's one or the other. In some religious traditions, we talk about this concept, this struggle between the good and the bad. And in Buddhism, we don't have that, but we mostly have these two aspects. We have there's always two sides. There's day and night, masculine and feminine, and we, on an emotional level, now our subtle mind, our emotions, is based mostly on two aspects, attraction and aversion. We're made up mostly of these two. If we look at our actions, we look at our emotions, etc., they can be distinguished, they can be divided up in these two groups, and then there's that third category of neutral. But mostly we distinguish things based on attraction, which can manifest in many different ways, and aversion. So aversion, it manifests as resentment and anger and jealousy and envy. There's also part of attraction also with envy, but there's also aversion. And then for attraction, there's attachment, desire, dissatisfaction. Also with dissatisfaction, there's a little bit of attraction, and then there's also a part that's aversion. But mostly we have these two, objects of attraction, objects of aversion. Objects, we mean people, situations, material things, idealized ideas, where we project both our attraction and aversion. So both here refers to objects of attraction and aversion. What does that mean? Meditate on the emptiness of both. The emptiness starts with the idea that if something is empty, to say that something is empty, it means to negate something. I can say, this glass is empty of milk, right? But if I say, this glass is empty of water, that's not true, because there is water. But if I say this glass is empty, to be able to understand this negation, I have to understand the object of negation. It's empty, okay, but empty of what? So everything that we negate, it's the existence of something. So if I say the table is empty the table is empty, or the glass, or the person, but or is not. This person is not like this. It's missing. Missing what? Missing. There isn't what? So to understand a negation, I need to understand what the object of negation is. Because if you asked me, in this room, is there an elephant or not? In your opinion? I can ask, are there depictions of elephants? Yeah, we could find one somewhere. Don't know where, but for sure there's some kind of representation of an elephant here right behind me. So, there's also a statue of one over there too, but a real elephant? Is there one? No, there isn't. Are we sure? How is it that we're sure that there is no elephant here in this room? What allows us to negate with certainty the presence of an elephant? Our ability to imagine what it would be like to have an elephant here in the room. But if we didn't know what an elephant was, and we weren't able to imagine an elephant here, we would never be able to negate its non-existence. Like saying, in the table in front of you, is there a shuma? Is there a shuma or not? How can I negate a shuma if I don't know what a shuma is? In Tibetan, it means cockroach. But I like the word. I like the sound of the words. It has nothing to do with shiluma. It seems not at all connected to the actual meaning. But now that I've asked you, now that I've told you what a shiluma is, and well, I don't see one, so I can say no. So what allows me to negate something? The ability to imagine, the affirmation. I can negate something. I need to be able to imagine it. The opposite of a negation is affirmation. I need to be able to imagine that, and then I match that with my perception of senses, and I can say it's not there. So no, there's not an elephant here, because if there were, we'd be able to see it, and we don't. It's not. It's not small. Even if I ask you if there are cockroaches in here, we need to really look. But if there were an elephant, it wouldn't have any place to hide. So when it says meditate on the emptiness of both, that the starting point is a fundamental point, which is described by Shantideva in the Bodhisattva Charavatara, where he says, without entering in contact with the designated object, it's not possible to apprehend its non-existence. Without coming into contact with the designated object, you cannot apprehend its non-existence. I can't apprehend the non-existence of an elephant if I don't come into contact with an elephant in this room. So before first negating something, I first need to be able to imagine it. So let's remember that every time there's a negation, this negation has an object of negation. And the negation exists in opposition of an affirmation of the same object. We have two modalities to the two modalities that are directly opposite. So there is an elephant, there's not an elephant. And the difference is one is the affirmation of the existence, and the other one is the negation of the existence of an elephant. We have two ways of seeing the same thing. We have the elephant in the room. One affirms and one negates. And now we'll understand why we're doing this whole explanation. Is that clear up to here? So when we have an object of aversion, try to think a situation, maybe one of the last times you've gotten angry, or something that maybe like you're in front of this situation and there's a sense of refusal. That's not so hard to find, is it? So think of an object of aversion. Now imagine that we're here in front of our object of aversion, and we're in front of the object of aversion. We just allow ourselves for a moment for that feeling of aversion. Let's let it come, let's let it arise, and we connect with it. And we observe for a moment. In that moment, that object of aversion, it appears to us as being an object of aversion because I project that meaning on the object, I attribute that meaning onto the object, or because it is an object of aversion because it's bad and it has its intrinsic quality of being an object of aversion. In other words, the object of aversion exists subjectively or objectively. I mean, without philosophizing, does it appear to us when we're there in front of our object of aversion? I hate you because I project my anger onto you, or I hate you because you're horrible. I mean, how do we work normally? It's objective. Okay. Yeah, I don't like feeling anger. I don't like feeling aversion. I feel aversion because you're horrible, not because I'm projecting onto you. And when we're in front of an object of attraction, a strong desire. Why are we attracted? How does that object appear to us? Because we attribute a certain value to the object, or because the object is pleasurable, good, and attractive. It's an object of pleasure, of the nature of desire for them, based on its own intrinsic qualities. I mean, without philosophizing, how does it appear? How does it appear to us? It's subjective. It appears objectively. It's important to understand that when we feel attraction or aversion, these two feelings are based on the fact that that object appears to us as being of objective existence, as an object of aversion or object of attraction. You can do with either. So let's take an object of attraction. Once I was coming from Milan to Albagnano, and there was a store where I used to stop every once in a while, and it was like an Apple store, say a Mac store. And at the time I had great passion for computers. Now much less, but it's passed. But at the time I really liked them, and at that time I saw that they were selling computers that were being used they were being used in fairs, and so they were really reduced. And I went by, and that time before going, I looked at the news. I saw that there was a new computer, a new model, and I was quite attracted to it. I thought, oh, it's so beautiful. I really want it. I need it. And I stopped in the store to to look at my object of desire, you know. So I start talking to the salesman, and so we start talking about the new model, etc. After 3 words that we exchanged together, he said, "Yeah, it's good, but there's this for this aspect, it's really not. It's not good. The previous model was better." And those 3 words were enough for me to not have to not want that computer anymore. I mean, I was ready to go to that store, you know, if I had had the money, I was ready to buy it. And then after those 3 words, even if I had twice as much money, I wouldn't have taken it, you know. And then I really reflected how that attraction that was like brought me a sense of dissatisfaction. I wasn't content with the computer that I had anymore, and I was comparing my computer to the new one, and and then after deflating the value of my new object of attraction, then I was really satisfied with the computer that I had. Said, oh, it's not so bad. So for the attachment, the object of desire, for it to be sustained is believing that the object of is believing that the object of attraction is inherently good. And for me to be happy, I need that object. Instead, aversion, which is the basis of anger and resentment and hate, these feelings need to rest on the fact. They need to believe or grasp at the idea that the objects exist intrinsically as bad, as an object of aversion. Is this clear? So it's really important in this phase to observe and to see how behind attachment and desire, behind anger, behind jealousy, behind envy, etc., there's the fact that the object appears to us as being objective. And we, consequently, we live as if we are a victim of that object. I suffer because you are there, because you do this, because he does that, because this is like that, and that other thing is like that. I don't want to suffer anymore, so I need to eliminate this object. I need to obtain that object. In the case of desire, I suffer because I don't have my object of desire. If I had that object of desire, I would be better, I would be more relaxed, I'd be happy, I'd be satisfied. It's not conceptual. It's a strong object. It's a strong object on which I project my desire. But can we see how both objects of attraction or aversion, in that moment of feeling, they appear as if they were objectively like that. But now let's analyze a little bit. What makes an object of aversion an actual object of aversion? Intrinsic characteristics or the value that we attribute to it as the observer? It's the attributed value. What makes an object, person, situation, whatever, what makes it an object of attraction? The intrinsic qualities, characteristics, or an attributed value? It's an attributed value. An example, we talk about the emptiness of intrinsic existence. Once we were in Tibet, make a very long story short, normally what would normally happen is that we would pay for a high quality hotel, and because you pay the agency ahead of time, so you would pay for a better quality hotel, but you would get a lower quality. But once it happened that we paid a 3-star hotel, and they put us in a 5-star hotel. I mean, usually the opposite would happen. You'd pay for 3 and you'd get a 1-star. And so we find ourselves in like a 5-star hotel. It was called Yaken Yeti Hotel in Lhasa. So here we're in that beautiful hotel, and at the entrance, at a certain point, someone starts complaining. I didn't come to Tibet for a luxury vacation. That's why the vacation costs so much money. And people start complaining. It wasn't even the moment to try to explain it. They just weren't understanding. And what I saw is that for what was an object attraction for one became an object of aversion for another. We can give thousands of examples of similar situations. What one sees as an object of aversion, the other sees as an object of attraction. What's good enough for one is not good enough for another, etc., etc. But even with ourselves, at a certain point in our lives, something can be good, and then another time, it's just not good anymore. When we feel attraction and aversion, try to go back to that feeling before of aversion that we connected to before. Now we see that object of aversion appears to us as if it existed objectively, but let's observe it. That object, that person, that feeling, we live it as if it were an object of aversion because we attribute a certain meaning to that object, and that relationship with that object touches some kind of conflict, and we project. Do we project onto that? We project and make it an object of aversion? Yes. And it doesn't mean that person didn't say this or that thing didn't happen. But if something is an object of attraction, aversion, or indifference, it depends on us. It depends on us, the observer. So if I have a strong aversion towards a person, and at a certain point I observe that the person appears to me as being bad, objectively, intrinsically, I observe it. And by observing, I realize that it's not like that. The person is neither good nor bad. There's no attraction or aversion. It depends on the value that I attribute to the object. I can see that filter that I'm using. Lama Ganchen would say every once in a while, phenomena are cuckoo. Phenomena are cuckoo. What does that mean? It means that phenomenon, people, places, and things are good and bad depending on the value you give. So if I'm able to deconstruct that objective existence, the objective nature of that object of aversion, then that aversion cannot be sustained. So we should, the aversion, that anger cannot be sustained. So we deconstruct that intrinsic existence. And when we deconstruct this objective nature, that feeling has nothing to rest on. I'm trying to make something complex simple. So when it says meditate on the emptiness of both, emptiness means the lack of something. So the object of attraction lacks an intrinsic existence. It appears as being intrinsically an object of attraction or aversion, but it is interdependently an object of attraction or aversion, not intrinsically. Let's remember that poem where we made the T-shirts and everything. We remember that that poem where it says, the magic circle, where it says, appear and yet is empty. It appears as being intrinsically an object of aversion, and yet it's empty. It's empty, and yet it appears as being an object of aversion or attraction, and yet it's true, because I live it like that. It's not that it doesn't exist. It appears, yet it's empty, but it appears and yet it's still true. So it's true and yet it's false. Because even if I live it as being an object of aversion, even if I know that it's not an intrinsic, objective object of aversion, I'm still living it as such. But this doesn't mean that it's not it doesn't mean that it's an object of aversion in an intrinsic way, but I can't pretend that I'm not living it as if it were not an object of aversion. But it's still false because it is subjective. So the point here is that we should observe the illusory aspect of objects of attraction and aversion, remembering that in this process, there's no shortcut or quick fix, to eliminate jealousy, or if someone has a strong anger towards someone, and then by reflecting 10 minutes that anger is going to disappear. So whether it, be it jealousy or anger, these are deep feelings. Our problem is not that the object of aversion appears to us as being intrinsically existent on a conceptual way. It's not like I see that person and say, oh, this person is like this in an independent, autonomous, intrinsic way. No, I don't think about it at all like that. But on a deeper level, on a non-conceptual level, the object appears as such. And we relate as if it were. It's a question. Are there absolute values? Ellen is asking. Yes and no. I try to what is a virtuous action? So one thing is the object of attraction, and aversion is something else. Or what is virtuous or not. These are different things. So objects of attraction and aversion, there's nothing that exists objectively of that nature. So because what's attraction for one is not for another, it really depends on the observer. What is virtuous or not, or positive or not, also this is empty of an objective value, but we say yes or no, because when we say something lacks intrinsic existence or is subjective, I mean, there's a very important characteristic that needs to be added here. Let's take an example. This object here, for example, how does it appear to us as being? If I ask you, what is this, without philosophizing, without thinking about it too much, it's a Tibetan singing bowl. Well, what's that? It's a flower. So there's nothing to talk about. This is a singing bowl. And we agree, right? But now, if we analyze a little bit, is it a singing bowl because it's a singing bowl, or is it a singing bowl because I attribute this value and I relate to it as being a singing bowl? Is it a bowl? Can it be a weapon? It can be a protection. It can be a hat. Depends on how big your head is. Can it be, in Portuguese we say benico? Can it be a chamber pot? Can it be a chamber pot? It also makes a nice sound. Can it be a dog bowl? I mean, how many different names can we give to this object? I mean, almost infinite. If we use the explanation given during quantum physics, in the same instant, in this present moment, in this object, there are innumerable possibilities. Chamber pot, singing bowl, bowl. The observer, the moment in which he sees the object, he chooses one among the innumerable possibilities. And in our ignorance, we think that one among the many is the reality. But instead, what happens if I strongly believe that this is a chocolate cake? Like, it could happen if I'm walking along the road and I see a store and I think that a mannequin is actually a person, or as there's a plastic flower and I'm sure that it's a real flower. If I strongly believe that this is a chocolate cake without a shadow of a doubt, in my reality, my individual reality, is it a chocolate cake? I believe in it. Oh, there's a beautiful chocolate cake at home, come over, or I really believe it. It's in my reality, regardless of how much I believe it, it's not a chocolate cake. Because it doesn't have, the whole of the parts doesn't have the ability to sustain the characteristics and the functions of the concept of chocolate cake. Because I can't eat it. You can try, I wouldn't try. This object, can this object satisfy the functions and the characteristics of a chocolate cake? No. So we can say that it's not a chocolate cake. When we project a value onto something, it's not that anything that we think is right and true. I attribute a value on the whole of its parts, and if it's correct, if the whole of the parts can sustain, if it has the right characteristics, and if it can sustain the characteristics and functions of that concept. So an action of being violent towards someone, if I attribute a value that's positive, like I wanted to help you, and so, you know, and then I beat you up. I think that beating you up is good for you. I'm not playing a game with myself. I really believe that you are possessed by the devil, and if I kick you and beat you up, and then you need that. I mean, there's some tribes, for example, some realities where there's a very, very high infant mortality rate, and they have this idea that the newborn is possessed by an evil an evil spirit. Um, um, so um, so they use the word object. They're not given a name. And in this reality, the newborn to exercise the demon, they they burn the skin with boiling water, and all of the orifices of the body, the mouth and the eyes and the ears, and they um, they fill it with, I think, said boiling water. I mean, regardless of if I think it's for your good, but if that cannot help you to have more joy or less suffering, it is not something positive, no matter how much I believe it, because what makes an object positive towards you is that on a short, medium, and long term, it brings you well-being or diminishes your suffering. I mean, so a positive action towards you, that something that could, like long term, to have more joy and have less suffering. No matter how, if it doesn't increase the well-being or diminish the suffering, no matter how much I believe it, it's not positive. So it's not that there are universal values. I mean, in generally speaking, yes, because we're very similar. But what determines this, the key point is if that action brings more suffering, or if that interaction brings well-being, or if it brings more suffering. If it's more well-being and joy, it can be considered positive. If it brings more suffering, then it can be considered negative. So when we say something subjective, it doesn't mean that everything that you can imagine is correct or exists. And so, same thing happens with this concept of what's good or bad, right and wrong. So, to talk about universal laws is very, very difficult. I mean, like killing, for example. It's said that even killing would be relative. There's some cases, very, very, very exceptional. If it's based on a deep feeling of love and wisdom, where killing can actually bring more good than bad. But for it to be like this, the person who does the action must have a sincere basis of altruism and wisdom. There's an example. One of the previous lives of Lord Buddha, for example, he was on a ship, and there were about 500 people on this boat. And at a certain point, he realized that one of the people on the boat was about to poison everyone, and he didn't have a way to stop that person short of killing him. At that point, he chose to kill him, not with the attitude of hate towards him and protection towards the others, because in his awareness he saw that if that person killed all of those people, and the person had also the intention of killing himself too, so he would have died with the weight of having killed those 500 people, and that would have brought on a mid and long term a tremendous amount of suffering to him. So to protect him, to protect him from that suffering and that karmic weight, and also protecting all the people who would have been killed and all of their family members, etc. So he took on himself the weight of the action. So this is possible only if it's done with total altruism, compassion, and correct discernment and wisdom, something that I don't think I have, and I don't think many do. So it's difficult to say on an absolute level that something is negative. Now, coming back to us, meditate on the emptiness of both. How do I meditate on the emptiness of both? When I have an object of attraction, what generates that attraction or aversion? When we feel strong desire towards someone, or strong desire attachment, does it bring us a feeling of peace or non-peace? The unpeacefulness. If we really want something, a person, object, a situation, with a strong desire, for example, that desire, does it make us feel good, like relaxed and peaceful, or anxiety and upset? Because if desire brought a feeling of peace, then we wouldn't need to buy anything. We would just need to window shop, and say, "Oh, how I'd love to have that," and we'd already feel good. Instead, what happens is when I want something, that anxiety, that sense of dissatisfaction, just obtaining the object is not even the point anymore. It's just what we want is to get rid of that feeling of dissatisfaction. So a strong desire generates also aversion and other. When we have a strong desire, when we need to familiarize ourselves with the fact that the object of desire appears to us as being intrinsic and objective, when in reality it's not. How can I meditate on that? I'm falling into the trap that I talked about before. I mean, we can spend all day long on this verse. Anyway, how do we meditate on the emptiness of anything, and in this case, objects of attraction, aversion? First of all, we need to develop the wisdom of listening, the wisdom of understanding, to get to the wisdom of meditation related to emptiness itself. Let's take an object of attraction or aversion, one or the other. I develop the wisdom of listening when I'm able to see that the object of attraction appears to me as being intrinsic, autonomous, independent, as object of attraction, and I understand that it's not like that. I understand that even if it appears as being of objective existence. It's actually subjective. I repeated it 1,000 times. I've understood it. I understand it. I believe it. But I haven't really understood it yet. How does this apply to very subtle effects, which are considered to be enduring, that carry our karmic imprints, for example, and so on. So let's to look at the deeper aspect of the imprints of our karma. Let's start with the wisdom of the listening. So we need to understand. So I observe my object of desire, and I'm able to see conceptually how it appears to me as being of intrinsic existence, and I know it's not like that. In other words, I'm able to see and understand that the reality appears as if it were objective, but we know that like desire is subjective. On that second level, which is called the wisdom of comprehension, of understanding, is when this object of desire, aversion, whatever it is, it appears to me as being of intrinsic existence, and I know that it's not like that. It's no longer a repetition of something that someone told me. It's my own certainty. Maybe Buddha at that point would say, no, it's of intrinsic existence, but no. Because if it were, everyone would see it in the same way. If it were intrinsically existence, I would see it in the same way too. If it were of intrinsic existence, it would never change. It would never be able to interact with others, and instead it's not like that. But I have my deep certainty that the object is that the object lacks intrinsic existence and is not as it appears. This is a certainty that no one can take away from me. It's not a mere repetition of what I've learned. Once I've gotten to that point, I've completed the conceptual process. But now I need to take that concept and take it from a conceptual level to a non-conceptual level. And what happens here, we begin that process of familiarization. So this process is called meditating on the emptiness, on something. It happens like this. You choose a specific object, take an object of attraction or aversion, let's say attraction, observe that object of attraction, observe. First of all, start with a conceptual framework. It doesn't exist objectively. Why? Why is it subjective? Because it's interdependent, because it depends on causes and condition, it depends on the value that I attribute to it, etc. But so I'm able to give this analytical an analysis to get to the conclusion that it is not of intrinsic existence. And once I've done that, I set that analysis, the conclusion, aside. I come back to the present moment. I observe that object of attraction without trying to connect with it conceptually, and I allow myself a spontaneous reaction. When I'm there, what's my spontaneous reaction in front of an object of attraction, an object of attachment is attraction. So it spontaneously appears as an object of attachment and attraction, and I generate desire. When that feeling starts to arise, at that point, I take my analysis from before and I apply it. I'm able to deconstruct that perception. When I'm able to do that, where I'm in front of that object that does not appear the way it does, it doesn't exist the way it appears, and I can say that object is not of intrinsic existence. It does not exist the way it appears. I can stay with this negation for as long as I can. It's still conceptual, but I'm familiarizing myself possibly with single-pointed concentration, with this lack of intrinsic existence. Why? Because our mind is not able to have two directly opposite thoughts at the same time. We're not able to think it's of objective existence and it's not of objective existence at the same time. So to block the mind that grasps at intrinsic existence, we need to generate the mind that says it is not of intrinsic existence. And when I get there, I need to stay single-pointedly concentrated as long as possible with that conclusion. It's conceptual, but it's not analytical. When I stay there for a longer time, here I'm talking about having repeated it many, many times, there's a moment where it's no longer in that meditative state. There's a moment where one perceives the lack of inherent existence on a non-conceptual level, but on a sensory level, on an experiential level, on the direct experience. When you have a direct experience at that point, after that direct experience, that grasping at inherent existence doesn't exist anymore, because one has had a direct experience. After that, one needs to continue to have that experience again and again to eliminate the imprints of this intrinsic existence, because reality appears as being autonomous. It's not something that they taught us at school. It's not something that our parents told us about, like, oh, that object of attraction appears as an object of attraction intrinsically. No, it's something that is absolutely spontaneous, that we bring with us from life to life. The way to change that is to change the imprint, this way of relating. This change comes through having direct experiences, non-conceptually. Why all this fixation on the lack of inherent existence of phenomena? Very simple, because suffering comes mostly from our mental defilements, attachment and fear and envy, which come from our selfishness, our obsession for self-gratification, and all of the other mental defilements, anger, etc. To exist, they are based on this perception that reality exists independently and separately. So I see myself as existing independently and separate. This is the root of our suffering. This is the primary cause, the fundamental cause of every suffering. But the primary cause of suffering is an affirmation. It's a non-conceptual affirmation that reality exists intrinsically as it appears. So how can I eliminate an affirmation with a negation that is directly opposite? So I need to generate the mind that says, even if it appears as being intrinsic existent, it's not. Reality doesn't exist as it appears, which doesn't mean that reality doesn't exist. Reality exists in an interdependent way. It, this reciprocal dependence between cause and effects and the parts and its whole and the but not in an objective way. Here we took, this very short verse, one of the most complex points of Buddhist philosophy, but I think somehow we've been able to see it, no? Because here it says, when it says meditate on the emptiness of both, it means objects of aversion and objects of attraction. They appear to us as being of intrinsic existence, but they're not. What does that mean to be of intrinsic existence? They exist as objects of attraction, of attraction or aversion, in an autonomous, independent way. To be able to do this, one shouldn't put one's energy on the emptiness. But the first thing is to see the appearance of the appearance of objective appearance. You shouldn't obsess about that the elephant is not there. Should think about imagining what an elephant would look like, and then it becomes easy. So to negate the intrinsic nature of reality, I need to understand what intrinsic reality would be. And here there's a very weak point. Here I take advantage to touch it briefly. When you try to meditate on emptiness, there's a dangerous point where one can easily get lost in. Let's start. Let's talk about our. Here we have an object of attraction. So we have an object is and then not is, and as it appears. So ignorance says the object of desire exists. It is, and it exists as it appears in an objective way. And wisdom says it doesn't exist. It's empty of intrinsic existence as it appears. In this game, we have a few things. We have the basis, which is the object of desire. We have the affirmation, the negation, and underneath we have the object of negation on one side and an affirmation on the other side. We have these 3 points. It's really important that the fundamental point is to recognize clearly what is being affirmed and what is being negated. So our ignorance affirms the generalized concept of inherent existence, or does it grasp at the appearance of the intrinsic existence of the phenomena? Our ignorance is looking at the flower and says, oh no, flowers exist totally independently of everything else conceptually, or no, it appears to me as being of intrinsic existence. So in other words, the object of negation of wisdom and affirmation of is not the generalized concept of I mean, it's my own appearance. I mean, it's what appears to me as being of intrinsic existence. So I'm not negating a generalized concept. I'm negating at my grasping at an appearance. The flowers appear to me as being of inherent existence. Ignorance says it's a yes, said it's true, and wisdom says it's not. But what I'm negating is not the intrinsic existence as a generalized concept. I am negating the appearance. I need to negate what my ignorance affirms. Let's use an example just to clarify. It's an example that's used. Let's look at this flower, or look at my face. It's the same. Not that I'm a flower. So, since we started this afternoon, has my beard grown without philosophizing? Just like this. Close your eyes. Open your eyes again. How does my beard appear to you? You know, it's not a trick question. Apparently, my beard has not grown. And when I look towards you, it doesn't look like your hair has grown or your beards have grown. If we were then instead to analyze, has my beard grown since I've gotten up this morning? I mean, the beard doesn't just grow from 1 minute to the beard doesn't just instantaneously grow more. And so I have learned that actually our hair grows in nano millimeters. And if we were able to perceive that small measure, we would be able to watch this growth. But just if we were analyzing, and we said, if we analyzed, yes, my beard has grown since we started these teachings. I mean, you don't need a degree in physics. And when we see each other, we see like a phenomenon, like your hair, my beard, that is in constant transformation. But it appears to us how? It appears as static or in movement. No, it appears to us as being static. So even if my beard is impermanent, it appears as being permanent. And I relate with my beard as being permanent. So what happens here is that the fact, the object, what is the object of ignorance? Because in this case, it's the ignorance is what grasps at what is impermanent as being permanent. And in front of that appearance of permanence, I grasp at that, and I think it's true. So the flowers appear as being permanent, but the water, the running water in a river, no, because we perceive, we perceive the objects through our senses, and that our senses are not able to see the speed of change of the flower, and yet the running, flowing river, yes. I mean, we are made up of our senses. I mean, there are certain aspects that we're limited in, that we are just not able to see. So the flowers appear to me as being permanent, and I relate to them as being permanent. And this is ignorance. what would be wisdom in this case? Seeing that the flowers are not permanent, but it's not a permanent, like a generalized concept. No, it's permanent the way they appear to me, because my ignorance of grasping at the permanence of the flowers is the object of um, the the object of affirmation is not is um, sorry, the wisdom that realizes the impermanence of the flowers doesn't negate the permanence as a concept, which is what we try to do. It negates the appearance of permanent existence of the flowers. They're two different things, even if it's really quite similar. Because we say, okay, no, the flower is not permanent. On what level are we thinking? It's conceptual. We should try to go beyond this conceptual aspect and negate the appearance of it. Not that the flowers don't exist, but the flowers appear as being of intrinsic existence, and they're not. Let's give another example that comes from the Buddha Sutras, and which is always been used for centuries and centuries. It's one of my favorites. When we no, I was going to use the one of the mirror, but yesterday was the full moon. Let's take the example of the moon. Have you ever seen the moon in the lake or in the water? So I'm walking, there's a lake or very still water, and I see the moon in the lake, right? And if we don't analyze, oh, what am I seeing? I'm seeing the moon in the lake, but is the moon in the lake? Did it fall into the lake? Someone put the moon in the lake? No. But how does it appear to me? It appears to me as if what I'm seeing is the moon, when in reality it's not. What is it? It's the reflection of the moon in the lake. Another example, which is even stronger, is when we look into the mirror, we open our eyes in front of the mirror without philosophizing, without analyzing. What do we see? We see our face. If we stop to analyze, though, has anyone here ever seen his own face, or merely just the reflection of your face in the mirror? What happens is the light touches our face, and that reflects into the mirror, and then from the mirror it goes back and reflects into our eyes. For just a moment, try to digest this affirmation. I have never seen my own face, and neither have you. Not you, yours. It's not so obvious, is it? And if all of the mirrors that you've always used were curved, distorted, and at a certain point they show you a straight mirror, you say, who's that? So, do you have any doubt that what you see in the mirror is not your face? Or do you believe that your face is in the mirror? It's a reflection of the image of your face, yes. But in the mirror, is that your face? No. Otherwise, if you could flick the mirror and it would hurt, but it doesn't hurt. So what happens is, what I have in the mirror is just a reflection of my face. I mean, it's clear here. You don't need a degree in philosophy to understand this. But even knowing that what is in the mirror is not my face, but just a mere reflection. But if When we look into a mirror spontaneously, we think that we're seeing our face. Because it's not conceptual. It appears as being our face. When we see an image on a screen, TV or screen, do we think that that person is there in the screen? Like one of the one of the first films that was projected in public, which was a train that was coming towards the audience. When they opened this kind of cinema, there was this film of just a few seconds of a train that was coming towards the audience. No one had ever seen an image projected on a screen like this, and the reaction of most of the people in the audience was to get up and run away. Instead, now when we see a train, a film of a train coming towards us, do we jump up? No. But if we see something or someone in a screen, we know it's not the person, but do we develop attraction and aversion based on what we see? Yes. Oh, look, come and see whatever. But it's just a bunch. It's just a bunch of light on a screen. Oh, you shouldn't do this. If we stop to analyze it, we know that it's an illusion, but appears to us as being real. And we allow ourselves to relate with it as if it were real. Is that clear? Now, like the image that appears in the mirror, that exists. It's not an illusion. It exists, but it has an illusory characteristic because it appears to me as being my face when in reality it's not. Like the image on the screen, the image is there. It exists, but it's not objectively the person. It's a representation. And we can go on and on about this. Similarly, a dream. If I have a dream, and in my dream, the person, someone dies in my dream, and when I wake up, does that mean that that person died? No. Normally, it means that someone will have long life, but in a dream, if I feel fear, I feel any emotion, sadness. The dream appears as being real, and we live it as such, but it's not. Death in the dream, did it happen or not? Yes, but was it real? No, it appears as if it were real, but it's illusory, it's not. Similarly to all these examples, when we are in front of an object of attraction or aversion, they appear to us as being objectively objects of attraction or aversion, but they're not. And we need to deconstruct this grasping at this inherent existence, reflecting on the fact they're interdependent, that nothing exists as it appears independently of the value that I attribute to it. Now, where it says meditate on the emptiness of both, it's clearer, no? Of course, this is a lifetime path. It's not from one day to the next, but it's of great importance because when we're able to deconstruct, even just for a short amount of time, the intrinsic existence of an object of attraction or aversion, it's a marvelous, marvelous experience. And it takes, it removes the basis for the negative feelings. One last thing on this verse, then we're going to move on. What is this object? Do we all agree that it's a bell? I agree too. I agree. This is a bell. Let's say from this moment on, this is not a bell. From now on, this is a cup. Can it sustain the characteristics and functions of a cup? Yes. So now, from this moment, this object is a cup. It is no longer a bell because exists. It's not objectively a bell, it's subjectively a bell. So now we're going to see it as a cup. And everyone says, okay, try to see this object as a cup. Just for a second. Allow yourself to see it as a cup. How does this object appear to us as a cup that we use, as a bell that we use as a cup or as a cup? It's a bell that we're using as a cup. It's a bell that we're using as a cup because it appears to us intrinsically as being a bell. I can use it for many things, but to be able to see it as a cup, that it can be, I need to deconstruct the intrinsic appearance. Can I see an object of aversion as an object to practice patience? That situation, okay, I can say, this situation that I would love to avoid this situation, but since I'm practicing Buddhism and I have a wonderful opportunity to practice patience, so can I see my object of anger as an opportunity to practice patience or gratitude, etc.? Yes, but there's an enormous difference total difference between seeing the bell as a cup and seeing the cup. In the same way, there's an enormous difference between seeing the object of aversion as an opportunity of growth and seeing it and seeing an opportunity of growth. Is that difference clear? As long as it's an object of aversion that I see in different ways, as long as I have the determination to say it's an opportunity to practice patience and growth, and I need to see it in that way, as long as I have that strength to sustain that attitude, I can keep myself from getting angry. But that day that's missing, then the object will appear as an object of aversion, and I will get angry. But if it's not an object of aversion, like it's not an object of attraction, it doesn't exist intrinsically at all, when I'm able to understand that on a non-conceptual level, at that point I can deconstruct that emotion and it no longer has legs to stand on. There are many beautiful techniques to diminish anger, practice patience, etc. But one can can overcome one's anger only when one has realized the lack of intrinsic existence of the anger itself. As long as it's an object of anger, that feeling will find its way. If I'm able to deconstruct it, and I can deconstruct. It's no longer an object of anger, and as once it's no longer a bell, but it's only a cup. I mean, this is not something immediate. It's a lifetime project here. But if we can at least have an idea and just we can see the horizon and appreciate that it's something marvelous. So here we say, meditate on the emptiness of both. When encountering objects of attachment or aversion, regard them as mere apparitions and illusory. Kantu Chakten Yur Changtse. So what's an attached? What's apparition? What's an apparition? Like a mirage, like an object of attraction on a television screen. It appears, or something appears, something tasty to eat, but that's not going to satisfy my hunger because it's just an illusion of hunger. Similar to this, it just appears as an object of attraction, but it's an illusion. So try to see objects of attraction, objects of aversion, try to see them as illusions that appear as such, but in their very nature they are not. Just repeat one more time. This is a very long, deep process. It's not something easy or immediate. There are many, many subtleties. There's a lot of fine-tuning because the danger here, the danger is falling into nihilism. So, okay, well, nothing exists. No, reality exists. It's there, but it's not as it appears. So, when we're in front of strong feelings of objects of attraction or aversion, of these objects that take away our peace, try to see those objects as apparitions, as illusions, as objects of a dream. Not that they don't exist, but they don't exist intrinsically as objects of attractions or objects of aversion. So, is that clear? But it's so we should try each one its own level to try to reflect and see this for himself. Should you hear unpleasant words, consider them merely echoes. When you hear something, what comes to our ears? Words or sounds? Just sounds. Then why do we get offended? Can we lose our peace for just a word that someone says? Is it possible? Yeah, no? Why? Because we attribute a meaning to that sound that we hear, which mostly touches on this idealized image that we have of ourselves, of others. Someone says liar. I'm not a liar. What you say doesn't determine what I am. If you have this power, let me know. Let's try to use it positively, but no one has this power. And one says something, what comes to my ears are just sounds, and I attribute meaning to to those sounds, and according to the meaning that I attribute, I live it in one way or the other, and it's like an echo. They're echoes also because those sounds, they come to me and then they reflect to the outside. If I say something to you that you perceives as being incoherent or some kind of, that reflects some kind of conflict inside of you, that sound goes into you, it touches something inside and then manifests outwardly. If you say something that doesn't touch on any kind of inner conflict, you've said something and it just ends there. But if, for example, I have I have a low self-esteem, or I'm not very balanced, and I project my happiness based on what other people think of me, and someone tells me that I'm a liar, it's painful. What is really, what is hurting me? What is hurting me? That sound, or my low self-esteem, or the meaning that I'm attributing to this sound? I mean, it's an echo that's showing what I have inside of me. Is that clear? So, if someone says anything, we shouldn't take it. We shouldn't take it so seriously. I mean, what makes us suffer is not the word spoken by someone else, but our unresolved conflicts, our attachments, our erroneous views of reality, that those words activate. If I'm fine with myself and you say something to me, but you think like this, I mean, what does that bother me? Let's remember that when you speak, the only thing that I hear are sounds. It's incredible that when someone speaks, like now I'm speaking, what each one of you hear, they're your own thoughts, your own knowledge, not mine. The only thing I can do speaking is try to help you along a path to develop new concepts based on the concepts that you already possess. I have. So every once in a while I ask you, have you understood? Is it clear? You say yes, but I don't know what you've understood. And I think, what have they understood? Not because I think that you wouldn't be able to understand, but in the sense, verbal communication is quite delicate. So when someone speaks to us, what we hear is what's already inside. And if we don't feel well, it's because it's touching points, it's touching soft spots inside of us, our own insecurities. Is that clear? So it's, should you hear unpleasant words, consider them merely echoes. The next point is refers to another aspect. This part is about transforming adverse conditions into the path. In Tibetan, it's called now I can't think of the name, but anyway. The point is we are transforming adverse conditions into the path. So what would normally generate suffering, what would be difficult, I'm transforming into the path. If someone speaks to me with aggression or says something offensive to me, and I'm able to reflect in that moment that what I'm hearing is just sounds, and what's making me suffer is the fact that those sounds reflect something inside of me. So I take this opportunity, I see this moment as a mirror, and I'm not going to react with aggression towards someone, and I'm able to not be taken by a reaction. I mean, that's a great moment of growth that can happen. I'm transforming something that is difficult into the path. So I'm transforming an adverse, difficult, negative, apparently negative situation into the path. When my body experiences some kind of pain, should you suffer physical harm, you hurt yourself, it says, should you suffer physical harm, consider it the fruit of your past deeds. Someone comes and hurts me, or someone comes and punches me out. I don't know if that's ever happened to you, where you've been slapped, or it happened to me once with full strength. Maybe I was 10, 11 years old. And it was really quite a strong experience that made me understand many things. I was in school, and we were doing a theater class. And in theater class, I had I, I had a lot of friends. I had a good relationship with everyone at school. And in this theater class, the teacher divided us up into 4 or 5 groups, and we needed to act out something, and the others needed to understand. We weren't that creative. And the night before, I had seen a scene in the news. They were showing how they were how they were how they were stealing wallets. Okay, how I thought, oh, that would be easy. There were 4 of us in this group. I said, let's do this. So, okay, we say we the 2 of us, we are the thieves, and you 2 are the victims. So the scene where one comes from behind, and or one goes round and the other one puts the arm into the purse to pull out the wallet. And this friend of mine, she didn't have a pocket, and so at the end of the scene, I see everyone looking a little bit like this. I said, what happened? So no, during the scene, even the teacher, nobody said anything. Then the girl, she was a friend of mine, and she went to the side, and what happened? What what happened? What happened? I didn't understand anything. I didn't understand what was happening. So the lesson ends. My friends are kind of like set apart from me. I really didn't understand what had happened. I couldn't understand what happened. And during the break between classes, I saw my friends were just kind of staying away from me. And I said, what's going on? And then my friend came to me, and she looks at me and she just slaps me. Why? And nobody told me. After I just insisted, first so the first slap, I blocked her. The second one I blocked, and then I let go, and she got me the third. And then I said, what went on? And then my friends told me, come on, stop pretending you did it on purpose. I said, what? What? Oh, they said that I put my hand between her legs, which I did not realize at all. This was important to me to see that, first of all, the motivation's not enough. It's important what you do, too. Number two, that feeling of being accused of something that you didn't want to do, even if somehow you ended up doing. And it was a very strong experience for me to have been accused of something or said to be guilty of something that I didn't even know what it was that it was. And then even the fact that no one believed that it wasn't wanted, that it wasn't intentional. But when I received that slap, it was a non-pleasurable experience. Physically, it hurt. But more than physically, I mean, mentally, that sensation of having been blamed for something, etc., etc. Now, what was the cause of that pain, that upset? Something, the fact that other people judged me without knowing my motivation, the fact that this girl came to me and slapped me. I mean, what was the cause for this pain? To understand this, we start from a fundamental principle, the law of karma. No one can make someone experience a result as any kind of suffering if that person has not created the causes for that suffering, and the same for pleasure. So the situation, what happened was the condition. Remember this morning we talked about causes and conditions. My action, my thoughts, the actions and the thoughts of others, those were conditions through which an inertia of the past, a cause of the past manifested. Our tendency is to see the condition as a cause and to go against the condition. Is that clear? Instead, this text reminds us that when we see something or feel something, you feel that pain. You feel that pain as a fruit of your past actions. It's an energy that was generated and is now being used up. It's like a debt that needs to be paid. Karma is a little bit like a credit card with one fundamental difference. Like the credit card, we don't pay for what we don't pay for what we haven't purchased. There are no karma hackers. But with a credit card, I pay for. Lama Ganchen would use the example of the telephone bill, where every second was accounted for. So similarly, the actions that I do, what's the difference? I mean, with the credit card, the result comes every month, and I have a very detailed bill. Just imagine what a credit card would be like, where you don't know when the bill arrives. It could arrive the same day, or maybe after 20 years. And when the bill comes, there's just the total, without the list of what we've purchased, and one gets the bill and says, I didn't do that. Me? No. Instead, yes, you. So the fact that I don't remember having purchased it, does that mean that I didn't buy it? Did it ever happen to you? You've gotten a credit card bill where where you haven't remembered that purchase. It's happened to me, or I've even called the bank and then they say, oh, this, and they say, oh yeah, now I remember. So if it's difficult, so, so if you can imagine, it feels like an injustice, when we get a credit card bill that we don't even remember. But imagine a credit card bill that arrives with just the total at the end, and with no explanation of what you've purchased, or imagine that your paycheck arrives sporadically. 1 month yes, 1 month no, or so karma's like this. So when the bill comes and I pay, I'm eliminating a debt. Let's try to look at the debt as a kind of energy. And if I don't pay right away, I mean, what happens to a debt if I don't pay it right away? The more time that goes by, the greater the debt becomes, and karma is said to be the same. So at this point, when I experience suffering, a feeling of suffering, even if I don't know what the cause was, I'm using up my own negative karma. So I'm extinguishing a negative karmic force that I previously generated. So here, when it says, should you suffer physical harm, consider it fruit of your past deeds, not in the sense of, oh, I'm guilty. No, I'm eliminating a negative force that I had generated. But together with this, there's something very important. This process of purification doesn't come come by suffering. If you know, if the process of purification was through suffering, then we would do sessions of purification, to generate pain. Instead, there's a fundamental difference between extinguishing, consuming, using up a negative cause, and purifying it. When we experience the result, one is suffering, and that's not something nice, but we're also extinguishing a negative past karmic force. So instead to purify means to extinguish that karmic force without experiencing the result. I mean, one thing is paying a debt, the other one is having amnesty. So one thing is paying the debt, and every time I pay the debt, I'm extinguishing it. I mean, imagine paying your mortgage without diminishing your mortgage. The more I pay, so the smaller the debt becomes. We hope. I mean, this is the logic, no? But normally, with karma, it's the same thing. There are practices of purification. These are systems to eliminate this negative karmic force that accumulated in the past before one needs to experience the results. before the results manifest. This is purification. It's not that we should try to suffer more so that we extinguish more our past negative karmic force. Most of us, we don't even try to do it. Most of us don't have the wisdom and to do something like that correctly. But sometimes we suffer, no? So when there is a suffering, instead of pointing the finger at the condition, one should remember, I'm living this because somewhere I created this debt, and I'm diminishing the weight of my past negative karmic force. This is another way. It says, there's another way to transform the Kene Lam Kir. So transform the adverse conditions into the path. So if you have like a sickness or some kind of negativity, instead of generating more negative minds or actions, but with this awareness, we generate more awareness of the law of karma and extinguish even more the negative karmic force that we had previously generated. I'd say we're not in a hurry. Also because these few verses that we saw today tell us a lot. There's no hurry to finish the text. You know, we can read it quickly if we were in a hurry, but what we need is to allow ourselves to be guided by these verses, allow ourselves, let this advice penetrate like oil that absorb into material, because, or you know, like for example, if I have very, very dry soil and I add water quickly, maybe the water just runs out quickly. You know, instead, if we were a very fertile, moist soil, then even just a quick rain would be enough. But instead, we need the water, like little by little. You know, that's why we need to just keep repeating again and again. You know, because we're not here. Let me repeat one more time. We're not here to study medicine. We're here to be cured, to heal. Today we saw very important points. I invite you to reread the verses with attention. Apply them to your lives. Find your own examples. And then these verses are important also to memorize or rewrite them. Not necessarily all of them, but those that touch you more in these times. And then when one lives a certain experience, and then you can recall a verse, because remember that these verses, this is advice, heart to heart. It's the verses. It's advice to be guided. It's not a philosophical text. You know, it wouldn't be written. You know, it wouldn't be written. Meditate on the emptiness of both. Instead, it would be 3 chapters. The first chapter would be about recognizing the object of negation. The second one is how to follow the correct logical process to understand emptiness, and then all the reasons and then how to develop special insight, etc. Instead, here is just written, meditate on the emptiness of both, because it's not a text of explanations. It's a text to help us remember what we've already learned, and they're guidelines to always put us back on our path. That's not difficult to memorize. Meditate on the emptiness of both. Is there someone here who hasn't memorized it at all? Are you able to remember that? Meditate on the emptiness of both. So when we're in front of our object of, when we're faced with our object of attachment, jealousy, or aversion, recall, meditate on the emptiness of both. So we think Atisha, who is here depicted in red, with the red hat here on my right. Atisha is and these teachings were transcribed by his disciple Drom Tompa at the beginning of the 11th century. And all of these teachings with these words were transmitted and handed down, transmitted to get to us. I received these teachings in India for the first time, and then in Tibet, and it's with great joy that I share them with you. But I ask you to make these teachings your own. Make this text your own. Reread them, observe them, remember. So we're going to conclude here. We'll do our final dedications. Tomorrow we'll pick up from with verse 17, and we'll go a little bit more quickly, because they're not as dense as these verses that we saw today. Also, even if it should be it's interpreted, but let's see. So it's time for our dedications. At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the 3 jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness. At night or midday, may the 3 jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness. Repeat after me. Sem Chu Sutra. Chu Lam Chudro Lam La Parche Mian Warsho Lamgi Parche Lamtu Che Warsho. May the mind become the Dharma. May the Dharma become the path. May the path be free of interferences. And may interferences be transformed into the path.
May the mind become the Dharma.
May the mind become the Dharma.
May the Dharma become the path.
May the Dharma become the path.
May the path be free from interferences.
May the path be free from interferences.
And may the interferences become the path.
And may the interferences become the path. Thank you. Thanks to everyone. And we'll see you tomorrow morning.